Greetings and salutations, everyone. Here's another conversation in the AIOCS series. My guest today is Dr. Nikolaos, or Nikos, shorthand Livanos, from the Institute for Historical Research with the National Hellenic Research Foundation in Athens. A good friend whom I know since 2016 via email. And then we met a number of times, 2017 twice, once in Athens, once in Sydney, then
twice in Athens.
In 2017, what? And twice in 2018 again. And we cooperate within the framework of SO project, which is a shorthand for science and orthodoxy around the world. But before we turn to the topic of this conversation, which focuses on the project, I'd like to say a few things about Nick. So I go even shorter from Nikolaos to Nikos and then to Nick. And if I navigate between his various names, you'll forgive me, I hope. Okay, let's have a quick look. That's
this is an old
CV, which I couldn't find another one. With the National Hellenic Research Foundation, where he was still a PhD candidate, and I'll invite him later to tell us a few words about his work. That's his profile on academia.edu, where you can actually access some of his contributions. Nick is actually a Byzantinist, if I can put it in this very general fashion, manner, and you'll find a similar profile on researchgate.net. Again, you'll find some of his contributions there. And this is just to show you the pretext of our conversation, or the focus of our conversation. I'll say from time to time tonight, because in Sydney it's evening, 7:30 p.m. almost, and it's of course winter still, whereas I look enviously at Nick's summer attire in Athens. Mid-morning or so, or late morning. Okay, so this is the website of Project SO, Science and Orthodoxy Around the World, and I'll invite Nick to tell us a few more things about this project. This is the main page, the homepage of the project, where you find news and publications. By the way, this special issue of Almagest, Cosmogony, Cosmology, and Exaimeron is amazing, a must read for all those who are interested in making sense of how in the early Christian centuries and the Middle Ages people would understand the days of creation. So a stop that needs to be done. And of course, you'll find more information about Project SO. There's an introduction, there's the who we are. Actually, the information now is brought up to date with the latest installment of this Templeton-funded project. You see here the membership, the director, whom I invited to speak to us at some point, and he graciously accepted. The groups that work during this installment of the project. And you see also the staff of the project with Nikos Livanos acting as events and communications coordinator. And the last stop I want to make before giving him a chance to say a word is the YouTube channel. Of course, there are many other places where you can find information about SO, including Facebook, all that flashy stuff. But I think, at least in times such as this, pandemic, isolation, and all that, YouTube has become our greatest friend, isn't it? And there you go. There's a very important YouTube channel you should seek and delight in, Science and Orthodox Christianity, where you'll find many, many, many videos, interviews with people who worked alongside the Athenian team through the last 5, 4, 6 years or so,
Yes.
including the movie Science and Orthodoxy Around the World, which is quite insightful. And on this note, I'll stop the sharing. Maybe I'll return to share a few more images at some point. But I have to welcome once again Nico and thank him for his gracious acceptance, agreement to speak to us. Welcome, Nick.
Well, thank you, Father Doru, for this invitation. Congratulations on all the work that you're doing, particularly concerning science and religion in the Orthodox world, as we call it, because the Orthodox are everywhere around the world, as we know. Indeed, there has been an effort in the past 10 years, grosso modo, to advance this discussion on science and Orthodox Christianity. Not that this relationship is new. It is not new. It is very old, actually. And this can be seen through the work that we have been doing, not only we here in Athens, but everywhere around the world by scholars and people who are investing a lot of time in discussing these issues and giving their views and opinions. So thank you for this invitation again, and it's wonderful to be with you.
Thank you. Before we turn to the project and its 2 or 3 actually installments, I'd like to invite you to say a few words about yourself. Why I ask this question is because, like me, you are not what you would call a science guy or even a typical science and religion guy. You come from a different background in terms of your training and expertise. So do I. But the fact that we come from so different a sphere, Byzantine studies, whatever emphasis we want to put, this cannot stop us from appreciating, on the one hand, the richness of our Orthodox tradition, which, as you already said, gives us abundant examples of interaction between theology, culture, gospel and culture, science and faith, and so on and so forth. But I'd be interested, and I'm certain our audience will be too, to have an idea as to where you come from. What's your background?
Okay. Well, I studied, first of all, my bachelor studies were in Byzantine modern Greek literature. So at the university was where I first got my basic education on the world of Byzantium. Despite the fact that I was born into Greek Orthodox Christianity, being a Greek Orthodox and living with what we understand and what we live as the Byzantine tradition of Orthodox Christianity. I then followed, I did a master's on interdisciplinary studies between history, archaeology, and social anthropology at the University of Thessaly in Volos, which is a unique master's program, at least in Greece, giving focus on ways to understand a particular issue through various lenses and viewpoints. However, my PhD, I continued with my PhD, and this on the history of Mount Athos, and more particularly on the legends of the monasteries of Mount Athos. Taking a particular text, which is found in manuscripts of the 16th century, I tried to see how the monasteries of Mount Athos developed legends around icons or the history of their monasteries, and how this interacts with faith, and how this affects the view that the monks themselves have about the history of their land, of the monasteries, and about the way that they understand the sacred space and what is sacred around them in general, and how it is connected to their past. So yes, I'm from an educational point of view, I'm not involved in the science and religion discussion, which I was initiated around 2013, when I first worked for a project implemented here at the Institute of Historical Research of the National Hellenic Research Foundation in Athens, called NARCIS, which is an acronym for Nature and Religion in Southeast European Space. Now, this was a project funded by the European Union and directed by Efthymios Nikolaidis, who is a science historian, educated as an astronomer, and who wanted to gather people with an understanding of the Byzantine era and the modern Greek era, and to put down sources that depict the kind of relationship that existed throughout the centuries between science, or as we knew it in older times, natural philosophy, because science is a rather modern term and does not always describe this kind of activity and thought during the medieval ages. And what this relationship was, how it was formed, and how it developed, and who were the key players, so to say, in this relationship. So I worked on sources from the 14th to the 17th century because my interests also in research are not only on Byzantium, but also on the early centuries after the fall of the Byzantine Empire, mainly the 15th to 17th century, or what we call in our studies the post-Byzantine era. So it's kind of an early modern, as they call it in global history, but when it concerns Christian sources, we call it post-Byzantine, given, especially in the Greek world, given that the Greek world was under the Ottoman Empire, and these are not Ottoman sources per se, they are Christian sources, so they're kind of post-Byzantine. So my involvement there was to gather sources and to try to decode these relationships, particularly after the father of the church, Gregory Palamas, and to try to see how the thought of the Greeks who later went to Italy to study affected their understanding of this relationship, in contrast to the Byzantines, who had an educational formation within the Byzantine Empire. Narcissus was and still is, because we are, although it is not funded anymore, we are still gathering sources and working on this project.
Okay.
Was very much needed in the field of the history of science in Greece in particular, because this was the first time that such a gathering of sources had been done until then. During this project, somewhere around 2014, we had a discussion here, a group discussion, as we usually have within these projects. And we thought, okay, we're discussing what happened in the past and everything, but where is this relationship now? And where is it going? This is difficult to understand because when you focus on Greece, you have specific cultural parameters by which you can decode and understand texts or thoughts by specific scholars. But when you talk about the Orthodox in general, the Orthodox world is not one thing. And it is very much affected by the cultural environment of every land, of every people who are Orthodox. It is important to stress that the Orthodox are not only confined to the countries which are predominantly Orthodox, which is mostly in Eastern Europe and in Southeastern Europe and the Eastern Mediterranean, but also around the world, in the United States, in Great Britain, in Australia, a large Orthodox community, in France, in Germany, so in South Africa. Where do all these Orthodox Christians stand on issues, and how does their cultural environment affect this? So this started out as a discussion between us, a few thoughts, and we thought, hey, when funding ends of Narcissus, why don't we try to implement a project that will try to answer these questions? Because evidently we didn't have any questions because there wasn't much done until then. We knew that at that point, the only project that existed and that was more systematical and was funded by the Templeton Foundation was a project focused only on Romania and directed by Magda Slavinsky. And we had seen that her group, she and her group had done a great deal of work, but it was focused mostly on Romania. So what we wanted to do was to give a pan-Orthodox understanding and research. So we came up with a proposal that was large and was demanding to the Templeton World Charity Foundation, which actually gave us a very generous grant. And we must thank the Templeton World Charity Foundation, because without it, none of the work that has been done on this could have been done. And so we started Project SO, Science and Orthodoxy Around the World, implemented in 11 countries, in 15 languages, with a large group of scholars, of young scholars who worked as researchers for the project throughout 3 years, from 2016 to 2019. And this project has, because it is still ongoing, and I will talk about how it has continued, has 3 main goals. The first goal was to map the field of the science and religion relationship within the Orthodox world. Now, many people may have an opinion, may have a personal understanding, but this does not always represent the wider community. And an issue that came up was, is there one stance of the Orthodox world towards science and religion? Or are there many? And if there are many, or a certain number, let's say, if not many, what are they? how are these stances, views, how are they expressed? How are they implemented? And in particular, by whom? Who are the people who express these views and opinions? Are they only the leaders of the church, the bishops? Are they only members of the church, the clergy, people who are closely connected to the church? Or are they scholars in general, not only theologians, so to speak, are also philosophers, historians, scientists, very important. What do scientists think about this relationship? And not only scientists who are people of faith, even atheists, how they understand this relationship, how they understand the role of religion in their scientific work, if they understand any, and if they do see it. So our first goal was to map this field. And for this, we needed people who would work in practically every country around the world where there is a numerous community of Orthodox Christians. We first developed a database where they would input a large number of sources, articles. Yeah, if we go to the website, it's where it says data space. Yes, access the database from there because it's an independent page, and there you can find from all around the world articles, newspaper articles or scientific articles, books, even websites, anything that portrays this kind of relationship, and you know how it developed. And there's a for every book, for every article, for every entry in this database, there is a short summary for someone who may not have the time or the will even to read the entire book, but to get an idea, an impression of what it says, what it talks, and what the main positions are on this relationship. And the second goal of the project was to understand what are the main points of focus in this relationship. We knew, of course, that throughout the world, and not only in the Orthodox world, there was a large debate during the 20th century, from the late 19th century, on evolution. Evolution was a huge issue, and I think that continues to be an issue, if not as huge as in the past, because there has been great progress, particularly among theologians, on this issue. But still, it is an issue debated. But this was not all. You know, this relationship is not confined only to evolution. Many other aspects, such as the cosmological aspects, what Orthodox Christians, how they understand the new scientific approaches to cosmology, for example, Big Bang, and how this relates to what we know from the biblical tradition. What the human being is, and how we understand the human being, not only as a material body, but also as a soul, as a complete person, as a human being with a consciousness, and what this means, and how Orthodox theology could contribute to a wider understanding of the person, of the human being. Is there a common point? What are the differences, if any? Where could the entire society, which are not predominantly Orthodox Christian, what they could gain from an Orthodox perspective? And but there were also other topics, physics, for example, modern physics, very important. because it also has to do with the understanding of mass, of material culture, of the universe in general, and as well as, of course, biology and bioethics. Now, this is a huge topic. Biology.
For
Yeah,
interrupting you, it's
yes,
to show to our viewers the current installment of Project SOU.
yes,
And the groups, I assume, the groups that currently operate continue
yes,
precisely this line of work that you just mentioned.
exactly, exactly. And I'll come to this later on. Um, the issue with biology is very important, particularly after we have had the first successful experiments with cloning and the new technology with cloning. And this opens up our perspective on what a human being is. If there could be in the future a cloned human being, if this would be a distinct human being from its initial example, what
Original,
this means,
the original.
yeah, yeah, the original, what this means for the Orthodox theology, and this is very important, and how the Orthodox theologians respond to this challenge. It's a huge challenge. I think we haven't seen enough because until now, as we know, there is no human cloning, and hopefully, there won't be in the future. I mean, from my personal perspective, this is my personal view, but there have been of animals, and there have been, of course, in vitro and in vivo experiments with cloning. And the more technology progresses, the more easier in many ways it will become. And we will definitely come to the point, I think, that we will have to meet these challenges. Um, Another issue, of course, is the old issue, as I mentioned, that of evolution, the environment. Very important issue. What we understand about how the Orthodox understand the challenges concerning the environment. Global warming. Is this a theological issue? Well, yes, it is, in many ways. In many ways, because it has to do with our understanding of our role in the world and our responsibility as human people, as human beings, to safeguard the environment and safeguard the world that God has entrusted to the human beings to keep and to nourish. So, are we doing our share? We were given something. Are we doing our share? Are we working on keeping the environment safe? Not only to have a better life, not only to have a sustainable future, but also in the way that we understand our presence on the world. And this is very important. So the environment issue is much wider than just global warming or um, the environmental techniques and issues that we have to tackle. It's a larger understanding. It's the start for a larger understanding of who we are and why we are on this world. And most theologians, of course, have this understanding or have expressed views on this, but most Orthodox Christians or people of faith may not understand this particular involvement that they may have in safeguarding the environment. So we would like this discussion to advance. Another issue that we found to be discussed, and to be honest, we had no idea when we started the project, was the relationship between psychology and particularly psychoanalysis with Orthodox theology. We were very happy to find a group of Greek psychoanalysts, psychologists, psychiatrists, such as Reverend Vasilios Thermos, who had already begun a discussion about these issues. Because at first, the main issue of this discussion, we thought, was pastoral. When someone needs a psychiatrist and when he needs a spiritual father. When does somebody, for their problem, when do they have to go to a psychiatrist and when they have to go to a spiritual father? So, initially we thought this was just a pastoral issue which would be discussed within the church and would be given solutions. But no, there is a wider discussion because in many ways, modern psychiatry and psychoanalysis, particularly psychoanalysis, although seen as an atheist view of the human being and the person in general, is actually stepping on the ground that theology had made throughout the centuries in many ways. So the discussion is that what are these grounds on which modern psychoanalysis steps on and is based on, how this interacts with Orthodox theology in particular, and how can people actually benefit from this relationship, particularly people of faith, of course, when there is a widespread mistrust either between people who are in favor of psychoanalysis, who mistrust a more pastoral approach to their issues, or people of faith who have a mistrust towards psychoanalysis. How can we bridge these gaps? So there is a large discussion on this. And then, of course, we go to the core of the science and religion discussion, which is theology and philosophy. How does philosophy and theology, how can philosophy contribute to the wider discussion between theologians and scientists? As I said before, in Byzantine times, we didn't have science per se in the way that we understand it today. Science is a rather modern notion and does not have the exact meaning in all the cultures. In Greece, for example, or in other cultures, particularly in Orthodox cultures, science is regarded as something wider, not only the natural sciences, but also, for example, philology is a science, history is a science, whereas in the Western world, science is confined only to the natural sciences, biology, physics, and so on. This is not an issue that comes from a modern perspective, but it is actually a very old perspective, because the Orthodox world in general did not actively participate in what we call the scientific revolution in the West, particularly after the 17th century. So in many ways, the Orthodox Christians, even today, are much more influenced by the older understanding of science and research as an issue of natural philosophy, as an issue of understanding the natural world, and not so much as the experimental view and understanding of how things work. So it's not only about how things work. It's not only about the experiment and its results, but it's also an understanding of how the entire world interworks and how we understand and what our position is within this world.
It's a holistic approach to
yes,
a holistic approach to science or understanding of science.
Exactly. So in many ways, this understanding of the Orthodox Christians has many differences with the Roman Catholics and the Protestants, who were the ones who actively promoted, actually, particularly the Catholics, what we know today as the modern scientific revolution, which actually took place and was initiated within the scientific environment of the Catholic Church. And it is not actually, many people think that this is, modern science is atheist. Well, I don't know what it is. If it is atheist, we can, and we should or could put these kind of labels on things, but the truth is that it did start from the way that the Catholic Church understood and pursued knowledge, particularly in early modern and modern times. So yes, today, of course, the Orthodox Christians have very much been influenced by this understanding in the West. This has been widespread throughout the world, but still, there is a basis of the Orthodox Christians, particularly within theology, that can give us a different approach and a different perspective. So the question that we had as historians, in particular, is how philosophy can contribute to the discussion between theologians and scientists. Can we go back to the origins of science within philosophy and the relationship, the initial relationship of theology with philosophy? Not only ancient pre-Christian philosophy, Greek-Roman philosophy, but also with the philosophy of the Christian world during the Byzantine era. So these are questions that are tackled by theologians and philosophers. And we saw that there is a lot of work that can be done on all of these levels, on all of these issues. Now, so apart from understanding what the topics were, we also wanted to see who are the people involved in this discussion. Who are the scholars? What is their identity? Are they only theologians? Are there scientists? How many scientists? And are there scientists? This was a particular challenge, to bring scientists who are not really religious and to get their perspective of things, how they understand things. Of course, militant atheists may not have much to contribute to this discussion as long as they are not willing to. But in many ways, people are willing to give their views and opinions so long as they are born and brought up in an environment where Christian faith is not something unknown to them. It is a part of their culture. So what do they think that their own culture in which they were brought up can contribute to the way that they think, or does contribute to the way that they think and act as scientists? This was a great challenge. Not many scientists have an actual organized understanding of this perspective, and we had to get a few scientists to actually think things down, you know, and even put it into paper. In contrast with scientists who are people of faith, who have a particular involvement in Orthodox Christian faith, and have actually a personal understanding of their presence in both the Orthodox community and the scientific community. So who are these people involved? What does each person give to this discussion? And this is why we had a personal approach to this discussion and not an institutional approach. We were not so much interested in getting the official viewpoint of the Greek church or the Australian church or the Romanian church or the Russian church. Because, well, first of all, you don't always have such an official response. And secondly, these responses are in many ways also the product of a negotiation and a typical understanding, more widespread understanding. What we wanted was to bring the personal viewpoints into this discussion and the differences that each person and each culture that they come from could contribute to the discussion. And apart from this also, we thought that it was important to help advance this discussion and create a network of people and bring these scholars together. Okay, so we had you, for example, who were active. You obviously didn't wait for So to start. You were personally involved in this discussion, but there were other people as well, actively involved, sometimes publishing, sometimes not, but having given opinions in more popular journals or newspapers, philosophers, people who were quite interested, not only today, but during the past 20 years in particular, 30 years, um, and to bring these people together and spark a discussion.
And it has been quite a ride.
Yes, yes. As we can all understand, this has not been easy because the Orthodox viewpoints are not mainstream in many aspects. You don't really have a very mainstream opinion on any topic. There are various views, and these views are not only the product of a particular culture or a particular church, but they are also the views of people who are involved in this discussion.
Which is, I believe, the beauty of your initiative, the group in Athens, because you had this intuition, which I believe is fundamental for the understanding of Orthodoxy in contemporary world, namely that we are a polyphonic instrument, so to speak, an orchestra. Yes. Rather than one voice singing at the microphone and everyone else following suit, amen, amen. And this is a richness of Orthodoxy as a polyphonic instrument, an instrument with many voices, which I discovered actually through you, through the project. Meeting in Athens so many people from so many backgrounds, as you said, scientists, historians, philosophers, theologians, Orthodox and non-Orthodox, believers and non-believers, but all of them sort of coming together because of this framework, because Orthodoxy by definition is an open framework. At least that's how I understood it. And this is how I experienced all those beautiful conferences that you organized. Whatever outcomes resulted, this is the first volume of proceedings showing the contributions that were made on the occasion of the first conference in 2017, 2 more volumes to come, and so on and so forth. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption, but the enthusiasm...
No interruption at all. You're actually very correct. This is true. The Orthodox are a wide community, different in many aspects, united by a common dogmatic approach to faith, obviously, but very much different in many aspects and the understanding, not only between different cultures, but also within the same culture. We have different voices, different approaches. Here in Greece, for example, on various issues, we have various approaches within the Greek church and among people of faith. And this is true. Orthodox Christianity is not is a unique body in terms of faith, but is a very diverse body in terms of multilateral approaches within, of course, a common basic understanding of our faith. Many issues have not been discussed in the Orthodox world, particularly concerning the relationship with science, because you don't have the what you would have in the Roman Catholic Church, for example, where if you had a particular issue, the Vatican would start a committee, discuss it, and put down a decree which would probably be signed by the Pope, and all the churches around the world would have to follow. Obviously, there are many views and opinions within the Roman Catholic Church as well, and of course among the Protestants, which are not one thing. You know, the Protestants, as we know, are also a diverse group, but we don't have this in the Orthodox community. Therefore, the only organized in terms of giving an institutional approach and an institutional, so to say, solution, although I don't like this word because it's not actually a solution, is on bioethics. There have been bioethics committees in various Orthodox churches, still between them with various differences, but there has been an organized effort to try to give an orthodox response to issues concerning these new biological issues that we have from modern science and biology, and to put the theological perspective. But this has been the only organized discussion within the Orthodox Church. So, as I said earlier, there were initiatives, not ecclesiastical initiatives. For example, the initiative in Romania by Magda Slavinsky and others to start producing opinions, to bring together opinions and views, and to start putting people to discuss and to write and to give these opinions and to analyze their views so that this discussion could go on and perhaps find a common ground. And this is also what we did. So we organized conferences and workshops, but we also wanted to communicate this work and to communicate the work of these scholars with a wider public. Hence, we also hosted various lectures throughout the world. One of them was in Sydney with, I think was enormously successful because it was a wonderful discussion, a really wonderful discussion. And Sydney in particular is important because Australia is not a predominantly Orthodox country. And it is very important to see and to live how the Orthodox Christians and non-Orthodox Christians in Australia understand Orthodox Christianity and its relation to science. So for many aspects, and we thank you very much for your personal contribution to this. It was great, apart from, of course, your general contribution to the project, which has been enormous and has been very provocative in bringing views and to the table, and has sparked discussions in many ways. You know, and this is really a great opportunity to thank you once more for your work. I think that such initiatives will continue even by other people and by other institutions. Hopefully, we do not expect to be the only ones. We wanted to spark this discussion, spark these initiatives, and to bring these issues on the table, and to bring more and more people into the discussion, and not only scholars. It is very important that people of faith also bring their understanding and also, you know, profit from what these scholars have to say. Because it is very important not to keep this discussion within the scholarly milieu. Scholars could discuss forever and forever in many ways, but how do they communicate this with a wider public? This is an issue that we also wanted to tackle. Of course, we could not start a widespread chain of events, but we do hope that in the future these events will continue, because it is also important to bring young people into this discussion who are interested, and to produce also young scholars who may be interested in working on this topic. This is why we also started the institution of the summer schools, which were a great success until now. And we will have 2 more summer schools until 2023. We have already planned them. They will take place as the previous ones in Crete, in Kolibari, in the Orthodox Academy of Crete, which hosted the last Pan-Orthodox Synod. And it's very important to bring these young scholars, those who are, PhD candidates who have finished a master's degree and are searching on topics or even if they don't want to work on this topic, at least to open their horizons on the views, the opinions that are expressed, and to have an understanding of the science-religion relationship, and to use this understanding in whatever field or topics they pursue. And I think that this has been very successful. And not only that, we gave a series of grants to younger scholars to produce articles in scientific journals, in historical journals, in theological journals, and generally to bring young people to the discussion, and not only people who already had a specific work on this topic. So a lot happened during the first phase of Project SO, which was from 2016 to 2019, early 2020. We had a series of conferences, 3 major conferences and various workshops around the world, 3 conferences in Athens, and events, lectures, workshops throughout, and all these that I described. And now we are continuing with the second phase. The second phase of SO, which is also funded by the Templeton World Charity Foundation, is important to say that is different from the first phase, although it is the continuation of the first phase. So what we did is that now that we know that we have mapped in general the field, and we have an understanding of the topics that are discussed and of the scholars that are involved, how do we progress this discussion? Can we help? Can we contribute in advancing this discussion? So what we did was that we created 8 groups, actually 7 groups based on the topics that I mentioned earlier, added by the historical understanding of the science and religion relationship, which is important for us as historians to understand in particular, but I think for everyone, to understand where this discussion comes from. We didn't start discussing all of a sudden in the 21st century or in the late 20th century. This discussion started much earlier. How did it evolve? Who were the key figures? What were the main views? And how did we come to what we understand today as this relationship? So we started the initiative to create 8 groups of discussion. Each group is organized by 2 co-chairs who are responsible for bringing together a diverse group of people from many countries, from many Orthodox cultures, and from many topics, working on many topics, on various topics, scientists in particular, theologians, of course, historians, philosophers, and anyone else involved, and to discuss particular topics and issues that have to do with each topic in particular. So what we want is for these groups to work together and offer a wider, a concise group of thoughts, which will be put down on paper at the end of the project. Each group will contribute a volume which someone could read and understand and learn about what these people think and what these people have to say on these topics. We also continue the summer schools. We do not have as many public events as we had before, and the pandemic has made this very difficult. And thankfully, we have the technological equipment to communicate with people, but still personal communication is very important, to come together in person, to discuss in breaks and after conferences and workshops. And so we will organize in-person workshops when this pandemic has, started being left behind, hopefully as soon as possible. In-person workshops where the groups will discuss together as a group, not only on Zoom. And we will have a conference at the end of the project, which is in 2023, of this phase of the project at least, to summarize everything that has been discussed in the groups. We will continue our summer schools, as I said, and it is important to stress that we are also building a library, a research library here at the National Hellenic Research Foundation on science and Orthodox Christianity for scholars who would like to come and study on this particular topic and find bibliography useful for their work at one point. So it's important to create this kind of library, which I think is unique. I personally am not aware of another topic-specific library on science and orthodoxy, although there may be such libraries in the West on science and religion. So this is pretty much what Project SO is about. I hope I haven't taken too much of your time, but I tried to be more as specific as I could. And if you have any questions, or I'd love to discuss them with you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nico. It's actually fascinating to listen to you, how all these things unfolded from the initial Narcissus project to the first and the second installments of Science and Orthodoxy around the world. I remember what you told me earlier, that you see all these three phases as one big project, and yes. I agree with you. But I think for the purposes of chronology, it's important to follow these steps. So the first step in with Narcissus was more late medieval, early modern focused.
Yes.
Then with the first phase of Project SO going to 2019, it was this wide tapestry of voices, interests, topics brought together via conferences, workshops, lectures, and the school outreach, so to speak, the summer school, which brings everything down to earth, to the grassroots, where actually science and orthodoxy should penetrate, And then this more specialized phase of the project, where you have 8 expert groups, which go through the everyday business of the specifics pertaining to those groups. And I'm privileged to co-chair with Alexei Nesteruk the cosmology group, working with people from 3 continents, a number of countries and cultures, and it's a fascinating undertaking with the challenges and the joys and the setbacks that we experience during this terrible time for the world. But anyway, the idea is that the show goes on.
Yes,
that's what matters. And because you mentioned earlier, for instance, the fact that something already happened in Romania. And as a matter of fact, I sort of been involved with Dr. Magda Stavinsky from 2001.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was a newbie, fresh doctoral, possessor, holder of a doctorate from the University of Bucharest. And I don't even remember how we met, but we met and we put in motion something that led to, I think, a number of 4 or 5 projects, yeah, that unfolded,
Yes.
until recently. And after my relocation to Australia, of course, I could not be so much involved in that Romanian focused activity. But one thing that I can say is that it is very important, and this is one of the reasons for which I invited you to speak about Project Soul. It is very important to keep rolling the ball.
Yes.
What I noticed with some sadness, or perhaps more than some, about the Romanian initiatives is that all that is forgotten.
Is it?
All that is forgotten, at least in Romania. It's as though all that tremendous trailblazing work, and it has been a tremendous work with a lot of people involved in the various projects. You know, all that work sort of hit a dead end for some reason, not reverberating outside the circles that were involved in that work.
Yes.
This isn't a fault of anybody, especially not the fault or the weakness of those involved in that research. But we should be mindful of the fact that, as you pointed out, this work is still somehow marginal within Orthodoxy. And while Orthodoxy is so varied and has so many concerns and approaches to things, personally, I don't think there is too much openness to discussing topics in science and faith, science and religion. And this is why I believe it is so important that we should capitalize on the achievements of your 3 projects, Narcissus, So 1, So 2, and do something to reach out, to promote not the message, but the idea of a conversation, of a needed conversation between people from all walks of life and backgrounds and views and so on and so forth, for the greater good, which is the betterment of humanity and the world. Because we, as churchmen, people of the church, Christians, you know, we cannot live in an ivory tower, and we all have a mandate to go and spread the good news. How do we do that if we do not engage the world in which we live, the cultures which we encounter, and so on and so forth? So this is why I believe that the summary, this overview of the 3 phases of the project is very useful, so that people understand that something serious is happening. And perhaps for the first time in the modern history of Orthodoxy, we Orthodox are invited to contemplate ourselves, our own features, our own characteristics, our own way of thinking, our aspirations in regard to this world, and engaging the scientific culture of today is part and parcel of our journey. We cannot ignore it any longer.
Indeed, yes.
Now,
well, I think that you're absolutely right. Of course, one project cannot change this in total, like in one initiative. It needs the entire community to stand up and to say that we will continue our work. But it is very important, what we understand, at least from our perspective, is that this has to be communicated to the wider public. And not only to the wider public as a large group of people directly from the academic community to the wider people, but also through the parishes. For example, to what extent are the parish clergymen involved in conveying this relationship to their congregations? When people go to their spiritual fathers, to their parish, with questions regarding science, and we are all now living in these times of the pandemic, and I'm sure that the first example that comes up is the issue of the vaccines or the virus. How do the spiritual, the people who are who are responsible for the spiritual guidance of the Christians involved in conveying this wider discussion that is already taking place? In other words, how do you take an academic conversation and make it into a few general points that a wider audience can understand, can perceive and take inside them? And this is a challenge. And it's not only a challenge for science and orthodoxy. This is a challenge, for example, for us historians. How do you convey the results of historical research to the wider audience? Particularly when, and this is a common ground, when both history and faith are part of a person's personal identity. So what you're doing is that you're not just giving an opinion on an X topic, which is marginally or less marginally important, but it is also part of each person's personal identity. It is part of the way that people have been brought up and the way that people understand themselves and their presence in this world. And this is a huge challenge, and sometimes is very much neglected by the academic community, who are absorbed in their research. And research is something which does not leave you even, even when you are sleeping. And your mind still goes through sources and things.
Tell me about.
Yeah, and so how do you convey this in simple words to people who have absolutely no understanding of what you're doing? I'll give a personal example. I once was discussing this with people who have no idea about historical research, and when I said I'm into historical research, they said, "What are you researching? Don't we know everything from the past?" And when I said, "No, we actually know very, very, very small part of the past," and how could you know everything about the past when you don't know everything about what happens in the present? You can't. So, it's very important to educate people on these issues. And it's also very important to educate the members of the clergy to whom people of faith go to in order to receive the Orthodox Christian approach to these particular issues.
Yeah, and I believe that you nailed it. I mean, it should start from the grassroots, and the summer schools are one aspect, but yes, it's the idea of somehow training our clergy to understand how significant their role is and can be in the creation of a better world, and this is precisely why I believe the Institute of Historical Research is the right place for this kind of activity, because, as you said, how can we understand ourselves today if we ignore our ancestry in the faith? And this brings me back towards the end of our conversation. This brings me back to you and perhaps to my own self. Because we both look, especially as area of expertise and interest, we look at the Middle Ages, and in my case, more recently, more early Christianity than the Middle Ages. And I believe that this is a unique way of working in science and faith, science and religion, by understanding how these kind of issues, similar issues, have been discussed, have been tackled, have been addressed by our ancestors in the faith, in the tradition. And at least for the time being, and by the way, I should acknowledge the generous gifts I received, or prizes I received from Project Science and Orthodoxy around the world, funded by the Templeton World Charity Foundation, gifts that allowed me to have two publications. A book that was just issued. I don't even have the physical object yet, at Braille, Humankind and the Cosmos in the Early Christian Centuries, and an article that was published in 2019 by the newly established Journal of Orthodox Christian Studies, an article called The Doctrine of Creation in the Age of Science. And this research helped me to see something that I can't just say it has a mirror or a correspondent in today's orthodoxy. Namely, the fact that the people who were involved in the church in the early centuries, in the Middle Ages, theologians, hierarchs, monastics, lay persons, these people were first of all educated, had an appreciation for knowledge. They were seekers of truth, not people who would buy the truth from, I don't know, put the coin, get the Coke. And they were able to articulate in such a mature, discerning and wise way how the gospel, our faith, our Christian ethos can interact with the, let's call it, the outer world of science, technology, innovation. And we have to speak about innovation because the Byzantines were very innovative, something that we forget. For us, Byzantium is the apogee of conservatism. Well, from a certain viewpoint. But there was so much innovation, so much mobility, flexibility, effervescence of research.
Yes.
That somehow baffles us, because this isn't what we see in contemporary orthodoxy. And I say it with all sadness, but with some hope, because as a traditional church, we still can retrieve our genuine identity. You said at some point, we are very much influenced now by Western patterns, and we are, even at the grassroots. And this is why the work that you do, the work that we all do under the umbrella of science and orthodoxy around the world is so important, because it brings back the memory of who the Orthodox are, what orthodoxy truly is, because orthodoxy is not about blocking everything. It's about meeting the world, encountering the world, facing the challenges, addressing the challenges with wisdom, with understanding, with patience, with humility. And I believe that this is the lesson that we learn when we look at those historical stages. And I believe that this is the greatest contributions that we, people so much in love with the Byzantine era and the early Christian centuries, can contribute. This kind of wisdom of the past that should be revived and articulated in a way that allows us to tackle the matters in a truly traditional fashion.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And, you know, while you were talking, my mind went to the Cappadocian Fathers, which you know very well, much better than I do. And how these really enlightened people were actually very knowledgeable of the science of their own times. They had a great education. They were very much into the innovations of their times, and yet they were able to express this and to communicate this with all the Christians. And they were able to express their knowledge and their understanding of the world through their wider educational perspective to all the Christians, whether they had an education or not, to rich people or to slaves, to everyone in their time, and to help them understand what is important for a Christian and what is not important. And of course, they did not rule out the understanding of the world. They never said, do not try to understand the world that God has given. They never said, do not follow the results of science and all the innovations that we have, as long as they contribute in a positive way to your soul and to yourself as a Christian. And I think that we have to follow their example. Yes, today is not the same as the era then. Obviously, things are much different today. We have gone through many cultural revolutions. We have a different perspective of life. We have different societies today. But still, the fact that they were able to communicate with their parishes and to explain things and to summarize things for them and give them what is important to understand and what is not, I think should be a guideline today for the church in order to tackle issues which are, in essence, are really important. All of these issues are important for people, whether we understand it sometime, whether we don't understand it. These are very important issues, especially since most of these issues, such as cloning, such as biology, such as the environment, we will find them far ahead in the future. We will meet them. And if we do not build a relationship with these problems and try to tackle them from the beginning, I'm afraid it will be too late later on in many aspects. I mean, it will be too late for the church to offer an opinion because things will have taken their own course, and this course will be mainstream. And yes, the church in many ways today is a living organism. Just as one person is, so is the church. But as each person tries to work on his or her own deficiencies and their own problems, so does the church also have to work on what keeps it from being able to communicate this in many ways to every Christian around the world. And I think this is important. Uh, Obviously, science and orthodoxy around the world cannot, offer solutions to all of these problems. What we wanted to do is, first of all, first and foremost, to spark this discussion and spark an understanding of the necessity to take this discussion further on the road. We never had the intention to become the only hub for this discussion. It could never happen, and it should never happen. What we want to do is we want everybody to be involved, because in this way you will have fresh opinions, views, understanding, and by people who were not involved in this discussion earlier and want to contribute because they have ideas and they can help the modern Orthodox Church to offer its perspective. And indeed, Orthodox theology, in many ways, has a lot to offer, I think, to the understanding of modern science, if not the science itself, obviously. But it's not its job to be a scientist, but to equip scientists, particularly Orthodox scientists, with the perspectives that they need to have in order to continue their work, to understand their place in this universe, in this society that we live in, and to understand how their work is actually beneficial, but through a perspective which is beneficial also for each human being, and not only for the sake of science itself. Sometimes I realize that many scientists work for science and not for humanity. And this is also an issue that should be tackled by scientists in general, but also should be something discussed within the science and orthodoxy discussion as well. So yes, I totally agree with you, and I think that there is a future. I don't think that in Romania it wore off. I think that what wore off and probably will wear off if we do not continue this will be the engagement of the wider public. And I think this is important. I've read to a degree because my knowledge of Romanian is non-existent, but I just catch words from here and there, knowing Latin, French, and various. But there has been an enormous work being done all these years that you mentioned. This work exists. This work is important. Professor Stavinsky herself and other people have brought their incredible experience into the work that we've accomplished in SO. And obviously this was not lost. But I think that we must now focus on approaching wider public. This is very important.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nikos Livanos, for your wisdom, for this overview of the tremendous work that has been done and still unfolds under the aegis of Project Science and Orthodoxy around the world. Let's hope that the efforts of those that preceded us in these efforts and our own efforts under the umbrella of SO are not wasted. That's my hope, that's my prayer. And it's not just for you or for me or for all those who are involved directly or indirectly in the project. It's for the benefit of the worldwide Orthodoxy and eventually for the entire human community. Thank you once again.
Thank you as well.
It has been a pleasure and an honor to talk to you and listen to you again. Hopefully we'll see each other again soon.
Yes, indeed.
All the best. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.